My name is Mara Monroe, and I was 33 the night my mother-in-law tried to charge me rent for a home I had already paid for. It was the 93rd day of my marriage. We were finishing dinner at her house across town when Glenda slid a slip of paper across the table toward me, smoothing it flat with 2 fingers like she was presenting a bill. $1,000, it said, per month. I did the math before I felt the insult because that is how I am built. But the rent was not the betrayal. The betrayal was the loan I did not know existed and whose name was sitting right there next to mine on a property I thought was only ever mine. Where ordinary women meet impossible families and answer with patience, paperwork, and a spine that does not bend. If you have ever been told that what you built somehow belongs to someone else, this one is for you. Stay with me because the numbers are going to do the talking. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I should tell you what I do because it explains everything that comes after. I am a risk analyst for a regional insurance company downtown. My whole job is finding the quiet flaw in something that looks fine. A clean application with one number that does not add up. A claim that is honest in every line except the one that matters. People lie in shapes, and after 11 years I can see the shape before I can prove it. I trust 2 things in this world: compound interest and a receipt. That is not a personality flaw. That is how a woman who paid her own way through school learned to sleep at night. I bought my apartment 4 years ago alone with $72,000 I had saved one slow deposit at a time. I remember the wire confirmation more clearly than I remember my own wedding vows. When something rattles me, I do not pace and I do not call a friend. I open a spreadsheet and I line the numbers up in a single column. Right, justified until the truth stands in a straight edge I can read. It calms me the way a hymn calms other people. My mother used to say I was born 40 years old. She was not wrong. So when I tell you I missed what was happening in my own marriage, understand that I did not miss it because I am naive. I missed it because I had decided just once to leave one part of my life off the ledger. I told myself love did not need an audit. I should have run my marriage like one of my files. I did not. And that is the only mistake in this story that was actually mine. Wade Monroe was easy in a way I was not. He sold medical equipment to clinics, talked to strangers like they were old friends, and never once checked a bank balance in front of me. We met at a colleague's barbecue and married 14 months later in a courthouse with 11 guests. I liked that he laughed at my dry jokes about amortization. I liked that he did not seem to want anything from me. After the wedding, he moved into my apartment because it made sense. I owned it. The mortgage was small and his lease was month to month. I want to be precise about the geography because it matters later. We lived in my 2-bedroom on Carroll Street. His mother, Glenda, lived clear across town in the old house on Fenmore, the one she had kept for 40 years. We were not under one roof with her. That distance felt like a mercy at the time. Wade was, by his own cheerful admission, no good with money. His mother handled his taxes, his insurance, even his car payment. And he said it like it was charming instead of strange. I noticed everything. But a man who lets his mother do his paperwork did not read to me as a man who would put a stranger's name on my front door. The first real sign came 3 weeks in when I came home from work and the lights were already on. I had not given anyone a key. Glenda was standing in my kitchen, rearranging my cabinets, a brass keyring resting on the counter beside her purse, jingling faintly when she moved. She smiled at me like I was the guest. "There you are," she said. Glenda had a way of taking a room without raising her voice. By the end of that first month, she had a system. She came on Tuesdays, let herself in with that brass key Wade had cut for her without asking me, and tidied. She moved my good knives to a drawer she preferred. She replaced my dish soap with the brand she used. She left behind the smell of her lavender hand cream on every surface she touched. A sweet powdery film that clung to the counter, the mail, the handle of my own refrigerator. I would come home and know she had been there before I saw a single thing out of place just by breathing. She called my furniture the family's things. My grandmother's chair became that chair we have. It was small and it was constant, and it was the kind of thing that sounds petty when you say it out loud, which is exactly why it works. I did not fight her on the knives. I want to be honest about that because I know how it looks. I did not back down because I was afraid of her. I backed down because I was watching. A good analyst does not argue with the first anomaly. She logs it and she waits for the second. So I logged the key and the cream and the way she called my things hours, and I waited. One Tuesday she ran her thumb along the edge of my counter and asked in the lightest possible voice like she was asking about the weather. "Now whose name is the apartment in exactly?" I told her mine. She smiled and said, "We'll see." I did not know yet that she already had her answer. The paperwork came on a Sunday, day 21 of the marriage. WDE spread a folder on the kitchen table with the practiced ease of a man who had clearly been coached and slid a pen toward me. "Estate planning," he said, "the way you'd say groceries." His mother's attorney had recommended it. He explained we should add me to the deed so that if anything ever happened to him, I would be protected. He said protected twice. Now here is where I want you to give me a fair hearing because I have replayed this Sunday 1,000 times. I did not sign blind. I asked why a man with no assets needed to add me to my own deed for my protection. I asked why his mother's attorney was drafting documents about my property. He had answers, smooth ones, and his hand was warm on my arm, and we were 3 weeks married. But I am still me. Before I signed, I pulled the original wire confirmation for my $72,000 and put it in a folder of my own in my own filing cabinet, the way I had logged every anomaly so far. I lined the figures up in their column and looked at them until they studied me. I told myself, if it is in writing and I keep my copy, I am safe. That sentence is the most expensive thing I have ever believed because what I signed that Sunday was a quitclaim deed adding Wade as a joint owner. What I did not understand, what no honest version of estate planning would have done was that adding his name did not protect me. It gave him a key to something far more dangerous than my front door. It gave him a key to the equity. And he was already standing at that lock with his mother's hand on his shoulder. So now you understand the table. Day 93, Sunday dinner at Glenda's house on Fenmore, the 4 of us. Wade, his sister Tessa, Glenda, and me. The pot roast was good. The conversation was ordinary until Glenda set down her fork, reached into the pocket of her cardigan, and produced that slip of paper. She unfolded it slowly, the way she did everything, and pressed it flat on the table between us. On it, in her tidy bookkeeper's hand, was a single figure, $1,000. She let it sit there for a moment so I could read it twice. Then she folded her hands and looked at me with the patient, almost loving expression of a woman explaining something obvious to a slow child. Now that you're family, she said, it's time we made things fair. Your apartment is family property. You'll pay rent like the rest of us. A $0 a month. The lavender came off the paper when she pushed it toward me. I noticed that. I notice everything. I did not raise my voice. I have never once won anything by raising my voice. I looked at the number and I looked at her and I felt the old cold clarity settle over me. The one I get right before a file cracks open. I smiled. It was not a warm smile, but it was real, because something in me had finally been given permission to stop pretending. Then I'll just go back to my apartment, I said. Simple, quiet, it should have meant nothing because of course it was my apartment. I had bought it. I had paid for it. My name was on the deed. I said it the way you state a fact because to me it was one. The silence that followed was the wrong kind of silence. Tessa stopped chewing. Glenda's smile did not move and Wade across the table looked at me like I had spoken in a language he did not recognize. What apartment? Wade said it with a small, confused laugh. The laugh of a man who genuinely did not follow. And that laugh did more damage than the rent ever could have because a person does not laugh like that at a lie. He laughed like that at a fact. So settled in his own mind, he could not understand my confusion. To him, there was no apartment that was mine. There was the family's home and I happened to live in it. I felt the floor tilt, though my face did not change. Across the table, Tessa leaned in to help. The way a person helps you off a cliff. We're family now, Mara, she said warmly. Family shares, you can't be selfish about a roof. Glenda nodded along, pleased, like a teacher whose lesson was finally landing. I looked at the 3 of them at the easy alignment of it, the way they had clearly discussed me before I arrived. And I understood that this dinner was not a negotiation. It was an announcement. They were not asking me for rent. They were informing me of a decision that had already been made in rooms I had not been in, about a home I had bought with my own money. I said nothing else that night. I helped clear the plates. I thanked Glenda for the roast. I drove the 4 miles back to Carroll Street to my own apartment. And I sat at my own kitchen table in the dark for a long time. Then I turned on the lamp, opened my laptop, and started a new file. At the top, I typed one line. What does Wade think he owns? That was the first crack. Behind it, I would soon learn, was the whole wall. I did not confront Wade. I want you to sit with that because the urge to confront is the urge that loses. If you show a person you're counting, they stop leaving things to count. So I went quiet and I went careful. For a week I lived in my own apartment exactly as before. Coffee at 6, work downtown, home by 6:30, and I watched. The first place I looked was our joint checking account, the one we had opened for household things. On paper, it was simple. His paycheck in, the small mortgage out, groceries, utilities. But I had spent 11 years finding the one number that does not belong. And there it was, sitting in plain sight once I stopped trusting it. A transfer $1,100 every month on the same day to an account labeled only with a string of digits. Not a vendor I knew, not a bill I recognized, just a clean recurring, zero leaving our account and vanishing. I pulled 3 months of statements and lined the transfers up in a column, right, justified the way I do. 3 perfect rows, $3,300 gone somewhere I had never agreed to send it. The number was so tidy it frightened me more than a messy one would have. Messy is desperation, tidy as a plan. Someone had set this up to run on its own, like a faucet left open in a house where no one was supposed to look. I sat with that column for a long time. I did not feel my heart do anything dramatic. I felt the opposite, a flat professional stillness. The stillness I get when a small claim suddenly shows me it is not small at all. I had found my anomaly. Now I had to find where the water was going. I gave Wade one chance to tell me the truth, framed so gently he would never know it was a test. Over breakfast I mentioned, light as anything, that I had been tidying our accounts and noticed a recurring transfer. Did he know what it was? He did not look up from his phone. Bank fees probably, he said. Or that old thing I set up forever ago. I'll check. He would not check. I knew that the way I know a claim is going to be denied. But it was his answer to that old thing I set up that snagged in me, because the transfers had started after the wedding, not forever ago. And a man telling the truth does not reach for forever ago about a thing 3 months old. While he showered, the memory finally surfaced, the one I had filed and not examined. The Sunday I signed the quitclaim, the folder had been thicker than one deed. He had flipped pages for me fast, talking the whole time, pointing where to sign with that warm hand on my arm. A rate lock. He had called the rest of it routine refinance paperwork to get our mortgage rate down. Nothing I needed to read. I had signed where he pointed because I trusted the part of my life I had promised myself not to audit. I felt for the first time genuinely sick. Not at him, yet at myself for the one column I had refused to keep. Then the sickness passed the way it does and the analyst came back. I had been treating my marriage like the exception to my own rules. That ended at the kitchen table that morning. I went to work, sat down at my desk, and started running my husband like a file. Glenda escalated before I could finish. That Tuesday I came home early, and her car was already in my spot. Inside, she was moving through my apartment with a notepad, taking inventory. Actually writing things down room by room the way you would catalog an estate. The good chair, the dining set, the family's things, she murmured, not even startled to see me on the entry table sat that brass keyring, and beside it, my mail fanned out, and clearly read the envelopes carrying the faint lavender of her hands. She had opened nothing. But she had handled everything, just making sure we know what's here. She said, for the insurance. I almost laughed. I do insurance. There was no policy that needed an inventory taken by my mother-in-law in my living room while I was at work. She was not protecting the things. She was claiming them out loud in front of the one witness who counted me. I want to pause the story right here because this is the part I need you to hear. If a person keeps a key to your home and treats your name like a suggestion, that is not closeness. That is a claim being staked quietly one Tuesday at a time until the day they hand you a bill for living in your own life. Write down what is yours while it is still quiet. Find the deed. Find the account numbers. Put them somewhere only you can reach. I will tell you in a few minutes exactly why I am begging you to do this today. Subscribe so the next part actually finds you, because the algorithm is not family either. That night I changed nothing and said nothing, but I started building the file in earnest. Glenda had given me my next thread without meaning to: insurance inventory. Someone in this family was very interested in what my apartment was worth. The next morning at my desk, I did the thing I should have done before I ever said I do. I ran the property the way I would run any asset on my desk. First, my own records. I pulled the wire confirmation for the $72,000, the down payment, traced clean from my personal brokerage account. Money I had earned and saved years before I ever met Wade Monroe. That paper was gold, and I knew it. Separate property leaves a trail if you keep the trail, and I had kept mine. Then I pulled what I could find on the apartment itself. Most people think a home is a private thing. It is not. A deed is a public record. A lien is a public record. I requested the recorded documents for my address, paid the small fee, and waited 2 days that felt like 2 weeks. While I waited, I noticed a name I did not know surfacing in our account history. A loan surer, the kind that handles second mortgages and home equity lines. Not my lender. Not the company that held my small first mortgage. A second surer attached somehow to my address that I had never knowingly done business with. I am trained not to jump. I logged it and waited for the records. But I already felt the shape of it forming the way I feel a claim turn from honest to fraudulent. Not all at once, but in a slow tightening, like a knot you realize too late someone tied behind your back. The transfers, the rate lock, the thick folder, Glenda's inventory, a surer I had never chosen on a property I had bought alone. I did not yet have the document in my hand, but I knew what I was about to find, and I knew it was going to be worse than rent. The family got to me before the records did. It started with a text from a cousin of WDS I had met exactly once at the courthouse. Hope you're settling in. Okay. It read friendly enough. And then just remember, family takes care of family. Don't be a stranger to your own people. An hour later, an aunt I had never met liked an old photo of mine and left a comment about learning to share. By evening, I understood. Tessa had been working. She had gotten to the family first. The way a person poisons a well before you arrive thirsty. The story she was telling was simple and effective. Mara is cold. Mara is calculating. Mara cares more about money than family. It was almost funny, the precision of it, because the person spreading that story was the one with the most to hide. I would learn soon enough that Tessa owed the family money. Real money. Money she did not want me, the woman who reads ledgers for a living, to ever go looking for. So she made me the danger before I could become the threat. Here is what that week taught me about isolation. I am good at being alone. I built a whole life on not needing a chorus. But there is a particular loneliness in watching a family close ranks against you in real time, in your own phone, in comments and likes and gentle little knives, while you sit in the apartment you paid for, accused of being the selfish one. I did not defend myself. I had defended myself my whole life, and it had never once changed a verdict already written. So I stopped explaining. I went silent, and I went to the county recorder website one more time, and this time the records were ready. Before I could open the records, a different envelope nearly opened the whole thing for me. It came on a Thursday in the mail, addressed to my apartment. The return corner carried the name of that second server, the one I had flagged but never chosen. It was thick, official, the kind of window envelope that holds a statement, not a flyer. I had it in my hand for maybe 10 seconds. Then Wade was there, faster than I had ever seen him move for anything, plucking it out of my fingers with a breezy, "Oh, that's just the refinance junk. I keep meaning to cancel these." He had it in his back pocket before I finished turning around. I let him take it. I want to be clear that I let him on purpose, because a person who snatches an envelope that fast is telling you exactly how much it matters. And I would rather know that than win the envelope. Wade had never moved like that for a phone call from his own mother. He had never moved like that to help me carry groceries up the stairs. But for a statement from a lone server I was not supposed to know existed, he moved like the house was on fire. That night he was extra kind. He cooked. He rubbed my shoulders and asked about my day and did not once mention the mail. Kindness like that is a receipt too, if you know how to read it. It told me the envelope had said something he could not let me see. So the next morning I stopped waiting for the mail to betray him. I went to the source that does not love anyone and cannot be charmed. I pulled the recorded documents from my own home. The statement reached me anyway, the way the truth usually does, sideways and at the worst possible moment for the person hiding it. Glenda, of all people, delivered it. She had been at my apartment on her usual Tuesday, sorting my mail into piles she had no business sorting, and in her hurry to leave when I came home early again, she left one envelope behind on the entry table, half tucked under a magazine. It was from the second server. It had been addressed to both names, Wade Monroe and Mara Monroe, at my address. She must have assumed it was already handled. It was not. I waited until she was gone, until the lavender had faded from the room. And then I sat down at my own kitchen table and opened the thing that had been kept from me for 3 months. It was a statement for a home equity line of credit, a HELOC secured by my apartment on Carroll Street, opened in both our names. There was a credit limit, and there was a balance, and there was something far worse than either, a draw history, a list, line by line, of the money that had been pulled out of my home's equity since shortly after the wedding. I read it the way I read everything, in a single straight column, the figures lining themselves up into a shape I could not unsee. Someone had been bleeding the value of my apartment in regular withdrawals for months, and my name was on it. My signature somewhere in that thick Sunday folder had opened a door to the $72,000 of equity I had built alone, and someone had been walking through it ever since. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat very still and looked at a loan I had never agreed to take against a home I had paid for myself, and I understood that the rent had never been the point. The rent was the distraction. This was the theft. There is a version of me that walked into the bedroom that night and threw the statement in Wade's face. I felt her in my chest, wanting out. I did not let her out, and that restraint is the only reason I am telling you a victory instead of a sad story. Here is why. The moment you confront, you become a problem they can manage. They apologize, or they rage, or they cry. And either way, they learn what you know and they start hiding it better. A draw history is a beautiful thing precisely because the person who made it does not know you are holding it. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I went to bed next to the man who had mortgaged my home behind my back, and I said good night, and I meant nothing by it. The next morning I was calmer than I had any right to be. I had a document now, a real one, the concrete kind that does not change its story under pressure. But one statement is not a case. A statement tells you a loan exists. It does not tell you who signed what, when, or where the money went. I needed the deed history to see exactly when and how my name had been turned into someone else's collateral. And I needed to trace the draws dollar by dollar to wherever they had landed. I am a risk analyst. Tracing money is not a special skill I had to learn for this. It is Tuesday. So I made a plan, quiet and complete, the way I plan everything. I would build the whole picture before anyone knew I was looking, and then I would decide with all the facts in their column exactly what I was going to do. The county records told the story I had refused to read on a Sunday in spring. There were 2 documents recorded against my home that I had not understood at the time, and seeing them in order made my stomach turn cold. The first recorded 21 days after my wedding, a quitclaim deed adding Wade Monroe as a joint owner. My signature, plain as day, the estate planning, the protection. The second recorded 19 days after that, a deed of trust securing a home equity line of credit against the property in both our names. And there again was my signature on a loan I had no memory of ever agreeing to. Then it came back, all of it, the way a denied claim sometimes resolves itself the instant you stop looking directly at it. The thick folder, the rate lock, sign here, sign here, sign here, his hand warm on my arm. His voice covering the silence so I would not slow down and read. He had not stolen my home in one move. That is the thing about people like Wade, coached by people like Glenda. They are too careful for one move. He had done it in two. First, he made me a co-owner instead of the sole owner so that my single name became a shared one. Then, with my name now sitting beside his on the deed, he opened a line of credit against the equity. Equity that was mine, every dollar of it, traceable to the $72,000 I had saved alone. And I had held the pen for both. I sat there with the recorded documents glowing on my screen and felt something I had not expected. Not despair, focus, because a thing that was done with documents can be undone with documents, and documents are the one weapon in this family that only I knew how to use. Now I trace the money. And tracing money is where I am at my most dangerous because I am patient and I am thorough and I do not get tired. I had the Helilock draw history. I had our joint account. I had WD's habit of leaving his banking app open on the kitchen counter, because a man who trusts his mother to do his taxes does not think to log out around his wife. I followed every draw from the line of credit to where it had gone, and the picture that assembled itself in my right justified column was uglier than I had let myself imagine. A large share of the money had gone straight to a mortgagor, not mine, Glenda's. The draws on my home's equity were quietly making the payments on the house on Fenmore. The rest had gone to settle balances on 2 credit cards I had never seen in WD's name only. Debt he had carried into our marriage and hidden behind that easy laugh and those warm hands. So this was the architecture. My husband had married a woman who owned her home outright in everything but the technicality of a recent purchase. He had added himself to her deed under the cover of love. He had borrowed against her equity using a signature he obtained by deception. And he had used my money, my down payment, my years of slow saving, my $72,000 to keep his mother's house afloat and erase his own secret debts. The rent was never about $1,000. The rent was Glenda testing whether I would simply hand over what was mine without a fight so the rest could continue undisturbed. I closed the laptop. I had the whole shape of it now. The only question left was the one that surprised me. Why was Glenda so desperate? I found the answer the following Tuesday, and for a moment it nearly softened me. Glenda had left her toad on my counter while she ran to her car for something. And in the side pocket, not even hidden, was a letter from her own mortgagor. I did not go through her things. It was open on top and I read what was in front of me because that is who I am. It was a notice of default. The house on Fenmore, the house she had lived in for 40 years. The house that was the whole of her identity, the place her late husband had carried her into and where she had raised Wade, was months behind. A bad refinance years ago, the kind I deny claims over every week, had quietly buried her. She was going to lose it, and I understood her then. The way you understand a frightened animal that bites, the family property, the inventory, the rent, the hawk draws keeping her current. Glenda was not greedy in the cartoon way I had wanted her to be. She was terrified. She snorts, was a 63-year-old widow staring at the loss of the only home she had ever known. And somewhere in her mind, she had decided that my apartment, my equity, my savings were a lifeboat, both the family was entitled to climb into. I felt for her. I want you to know I genuinely did for about an hour, and then I thought about the draw history, and the smile she gave me when she pushed that rent across the table, and the cousins she had let Tessa turn against me. I understood her fear completely. I just was not going to pay for it with my front door. Sympathy is not a surrender. You can grieve for someone and still refuse to drown so they can float. I took everything to a lawyer. Her name was Karen Esposito, and she had spent 20 years untangling exactly this kind of family knot. I sat across from her with my folder, the wire confirmation, the recorded deeds, the Helilock statement, the draw history, the trace I had built laid out in order. And I watched her face change as she turned the pages. She did not promise me the moon. I respected her for that. The law is not a magic clause that snaps the bad people into place. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But she walked me through what I actually had. The $72,000 down payment was traceable to my separate premarital funds. That mattered enormously because it established a documented separate property interest that did not simply vanish when I signed a quitclaim. The quitclaim could be challenged, she said, but the stronger card was the Helilock. A home equity line requires the informed knowing consent of every owner who signs. If my signature had been obtained by misrepresentation, buried in a stack I was told was a routine rate lock, its true nature concealed, that was not a technicality. That was a serious problem for the people who had done it and a serious lever for me. You're not asking a judge to feel sorry for you, Karen said. You're handing them a paper trail and letting them do arithmetic. Judges love arithmetic. I almost smiled. She was speaking my language. The path was not guaranteed, she warned, and it would not be quick if they chose to fight. But the cost of fighting me with what I was holding was far higher for them than the cost of giving me back what was mine. So she said, "Do you want to fight or do you want to win?" I wanted to win, which meant I spent the next 2 weeks doing the unglamorous work that wins. People imagine revenge as a single dramatic moment. It is not. It is a folder assembled slowly in the quiet hours after a husband falls asleep. I gathered everything and I made copies of everything, and I made copies of the copies stored where no Tuesday visit could ever reach them. The recorded quitclaim, the recorded deed of trust, the Hawks statement with its draw history, the trace showing the money flowing to Glenda's Surer and WDE's hidden cards. And at the center of it all, my anchor, the document I had filed on the very Sunday I signed away my certainty. The wire confirmation for $72,000, dated 4 years before I ever met Wade Monroe, proving the apartment was built with my money and mine alone. I lined it all up the way I line everything up, in a single right justified column, each figure squared against the next, until the whole betrayal stood in one clean edge I could read at a glance. It was almost beautiful in the way a closed case is beautiful. Every claim met its proof. Every lie met its date. I printed it. I put it in a plain folder, the kind I carry to work, and I set it on the top shelf of my own closet in my own apartment, behind the things only I ever touched. Then I did one more thing. I called Karen and told her I was ready to file. She asked if I was sure because once the petition went in there would be no more quiet. There hasn't been any quiet for a while, I said. They just thought there was. The folder was loaded. All it needed now was a room to be opened in. They gave me the room themselves. The pressure came first. Wade had begun to sense the temperature drop in the apartment, even if he could not name it. He started asking small testing questions. Was I okay? Was work stressful? Had I talked to anyone lately? A man with nothing to hide does not audit his wife's friendships. I gave him nothing. I had spent 3 months perfecting a flat, pleasant calm, and I wore it like a coat. I'm fine, I said, just busy. Meanwhile, Glenda, sensing the family plan stalling, moved to collect. She called on a Sunday evening, her voice all warm authority, and reminded me that the first month's rent was now due, $1,000. She suggested I could just transfer it to the family account and gave me the same string of digits I had already traced. The account that fed the hillock, the account that fed her own mortgage. She had handed me unprompted one more piece of evidence and did not even know it. Of course, I said, sweet as anything. Let's all sit down and make it official. You, Wade, Tessa, me, I'd like to do this properly. She was delighted. She suggested her house that Sunday. She wanted witnesses to my surrender. She would get witnesses to something else entirely. After I hung up, I sat with my folder in my lap and felt the strange, steady calm of a woman who has finally stopped being surprised. She wanted $1,000. She thought she was calling a meeting to collect rent. She was calling a meeting to hear the truth in front of every person she had recruited to corner me. I texted Karen one line. It said Sunday. Then I balanced the column one last time and went to bed and slept better than I had in weeks. There was one thing left to do before Sunday, and I did it on Friday with Karen in her office. I filed for divorce. I want to be honest about how that felt because I had not expected the weight of it. I did not file in anger. I filed the way you finally close an account that has been quietly overdrawing you for years with a kind of grief that is also relief. The petition named the apartment as my separate property traced to my premarital funds. It flagged the quitclaim and the helilock. It requested that Wade be made responsible for the debt he had drawn against my equity and spent on his mother's mortgage and his own hidden cards. Karen also recorded a notice on the property so that no one could quietly draw another dollar or sell out from under me while it all played out. The faucet was shut. Then I understood fully the thing that had haunted me since the dinner table. Why Wade had laughed and said, "What apartment?" It was not cruelty, it was worse in a way. In his mind and his mother's, there had never been an apartment that was mine. There was family property that I had been allowed to occupy and now had to pay for. They had rewritten the ownership in their heads long before they rewrote it on paper. I was not a co-owner who had been wronged. To them, I was a tenant who had finally been billed on Sunday. I would correct the record not with my voice. I have never won anything with my voice. I would correct it with a folder, a deed, and a draw history, in a quiet, straight column, in front of every witness Glenda had so kindly gathered for me. Sunday came clear and cold. I drove the 4 miles to the house on Fenmore with my plain work folder on the passenger seat. They were all there, arranged like a tribunal. Glenda at the head of the dining table, Wade to her right, Tessa beside him, and to my mild surprise, Glenda's older brother, Ray, a retired man with a blunt, weathered face, brought in as an extra witness to my expected obedience. There was coffee, there was a plate of cookies no one would eat. On the entry table, as always, sat the brass key ring, my key, on its own little dish like it lived there. Glenda did not waste time. She had me sit, folded her hands, and opened in the warm, public, reasonable voice she used when she wanted others to see how generous she was being. We're so glad you're being mature about this, Mara, she said. Family helps family. The first month's rent and then we'll set up the automatic transfer and we can all stop worrying about it. She glanced at Rai as she said it, performing fairness for the room. Tessa nodded along, eager, already certain how this ended. Wade would not quite meet my eyes. He knew, even if he did not know what, that something was off in my comm. I set my folder on the table. I did not open it yet. I let it sit there plain and closed while 4 people looked at it and at me. Before I pay anyone anything, I said, my voice is even as a balance sheet. I think we should all be looking at the same numbers because I've been doing some accounting and I'd hate for the family to make a decision without the full picture. I rested my hand flat on the folder. May I? I opened the folder and laid the pages out one at a time, squared to the edge of the table in the order that told the story by itself. This is the deed to my apartment, I said, when I bought it 4 years ago alone. Next page. This is the wire confirmation for the $72,000 down payment from my personal account 2 years before I met Wade. Next, this is a quick claim deed signed 3 weeks into our marriage, adding Wade as an owner. Estate planning, I was told. I slid the next page into the center and I watched Wade go still. And this is a home equity line of credit, secured against my apartment, opened in both our names 19 days after that with a draw history. I set down the last page gently the way you set down something heavy. These are the withdrawals. This column I touched it is where the money went. Most of it to a mortgage surer. Yours, Glenda. The rest to 2 credit cards in Wade's name that I had never seen until last month. The room had gone the wrong kind of quiet again. The dinner table quiet, except now I was the one holding the silence. Glenda's mouth opened. I did not let her in yet. So when you tell me my apartment is family property, I said, and I looked at her calm, and that I'll pay rent like the rest of you. I let the old line land, then I'll just go back to my apartment. Wade made a sound, half a laugh, the same reflex as the dinner. What apartment? He started, and I turned to him before he could finish. And for the first time all afternoon, I let a little weight into my voice. Not loud, just certain. This one, I said, the one with my name on the deed. The one your mother's mortgage has been living off of for 3 months. The one you borrowed against with my signature, which you got by lying to me about a rate lock. That apartment, Wade, mine. That was when the room came apart and I sat in the middle of it perfectly still. Glenda went first. The warmth dropped off her face like a mask cut loose, and her voice climbed into something I had never heard from her. After everything this family has done for you, she said, rising, her chair scraping. That house is 40 years of my life. You have money. You could fix this for all of us. And you sit there with your little folder. Wade was up to now talking over her, talking to me, to Ray, to no one. It was supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. Mom said it would be fine, and there it was, the whole thing spilling out of him. The debt, the panic, the way he had let his mother point his hand toward the line on the page. Tessa, sensing the floor giving way, tried to save herself the way she had tried to ruin me by going on the attack. This is exactly what I told everyone, she said, shrilly, cold, calculating. She probably planned this. I traced $15,000 to your salon, Tessa, I said without raising my voice, and she stopped like she had hit glass. Family money from the joint account. We can talk about your books too if you'd like. She sat down. I had not stood. I had not shouted. I had not said a cruel word. I simply let each of them detonate over the quiet column on the table while I kept my hands folded and my voice level. Because the most powerful thing in a room of people losing control is the one person who has not. And in the silence after Tessa folded, it was Ray who spoke. He had been watching the pages, not the people. He sat down his coffee and looked at his sister, this man who had said almost nothing all afternoon, and his voice was rough and final. Glenda, he said, the girl paid for the place. That's the end of it. And just like that, the only witness who mattered had read the same column I had and reached the same total. I let Ray's words settle, and then I gave them the only thing I had come to give. A choice stated plainly with no heat in it at all. Here's where we are, I said. I've already filed for divorce. There's a notice recorded on the property, so no one draws another dollar against my home. I have 2 options for the rest, and you get to pick. I laid it out like the terms it was. Option 1, WDE signs a quit claim returning the apartment to my name alone and refinances the helilock into his own name. So the lender releases me, and the lien comes off my title since the money paid his debts and his mother's mortgage, not mine. We settle quietly. The family keeps its privacy. I paused. Option 2, we let a judge look at the same folder. The trace down payment, the quit claim, and a home equity loan opened with a signature obtained by misrepresentation, which my lawyer is very interested in and which judges, I'm told, take seriously. Option 2 costs all of you a great deal more, and it happens in public. I closed the folder. You have until my lawyer's office opens Monday. Nobody argued. That is the thing people never tell you about winning with documents instead of volume. When the math is undeniable, the fight just stops the way a fire stops when you finally cut off the air. WDE signed within the week. Of course he did. Option 2 would have exposed everything. And a man who hides debt behind a laugh does not want a judge counting it out loud. As I gathered my pages, I picked up the brass key ring from its little dish by the door, the one Wade had cut for his mother without asking me, and I set it down in front of Glenda. "I'm having the locks changed Tuesday," I said. "You won't need this anymore." Then I drove the 4 miles back to my apartment. Mine. The locks were changed on Tuesday by a cheerful man who had no idea he was closing a chapter. The quitclaim was recorded by Friday, my name standing alone on the deed again, the way it had for 4 years before any of this. Karen handled the divorce cleanly with the paper trail I had built. There was not much for anyone to contest. WD took the helilock, all of it. Refinancing it into his own name was the price of the settlement, and until the lender released me, the notice I had recorded kept anyone from drawing another dollar and held the lien in place. The money had gone to his debts and his mother's, and even his own lawyer could not argue otherwise. I refinanced the first mortgage into my name alone a few months later at a rate I negotiated myself sitting across from a banker who treated me like exactly what I am, a woman who knows her numbers. Glenda kept her house on Fenmore in the end, not because I rescued it and not because anyone forgave anyone. She sold off the second car, took in a boarder, and clawed her way current the slow, hard way, the way the rest of us do it. I do not know if she ever understood that the lifeboat she tried to climb into was a home another woman had built, one slow deposit at a time. I did not stay close enough to find out. Tessa stopped texting. The cousins went quiet, and the first thing I noticed the morning after the locks were changed was that my apartment did not smell like lavender anymore. Just coffee and the faint cedar of my own closet and quiet. I sat at my kitchen table, my table in my home, and I opened my laptop out of habit, and for the first time in months I had nothing to trace, so I balanced one last column just to feel it close. Every number was mine. Keep the receipts for the life you built. Not because you expect to be robbed, but because the people who truly love you will never need the proof, and the ones who don't will always demand it. That's my story. 3 months, 1 dinner, and a loan with my name on it I never agreed to take. If this reminded you to check whose name is really on your deed, your accounts, your home, take that as a sign and check this week, not someday. Share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.